Okay. All right, what did we call it? Yes. Welcome everyone to the Riichi Nomi Open Prep Lecture, number 1 out of 2. Today we'll be focusing on building value. What do you do with hands that don't necessarily have a lot of value to start with? What do you need to do when you have to force value, say in all last at a close score situation, or when you're really, really far behind? Today I have Zell, also known as Steve, and Light Pink Yoshi, also known as Max, to lecture. These two barely need an introduction. They're both outstanding members of the Riichi community in the US. Take it away.
All right, thanks everyone for coming. Do you have any opening thoughts, Max? I'll let you get started. Otherwise,
Nope.
just tell me when you want to skip ahead to a slide. But we're going to talk about how to build some value in your hands when they're not so good or when they just don't have a lot of value to begin with. So let's get started. So first thing we really wanted to talk about is score conditions when you're playing a game, when you get to like South 2 or South 3. And this is keeping in mind this is all tailored to the Riichi Nomi Open, which is going to be a round robin, no
Not
cut.
only round robin, but it's also going to be WRC, but with red fives. So specifically, like lower UMA, but like higher potential point values for hands and games.
Sorry to interrupt for a second, but your cursor is on the upper left-hand side of the screen.
This is what you get when you let old people run it.
Fine.
Yep. If you just want to like shove it off to the right, it should be fine.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, there we
That's
go.
good.
Perfect.
Okay. Now that we're back to it, we just wanted to talk about what to do. Like, obviously, when you're playing the Hanchan in East, you're just going to want to make good expected value plays, and then we've done lectures. There's been lectures in the past on how to maximize EV and make good push-fold decisions, and what to do in a tournament and how that's different from ladder. But now we're going to talk about the late game, and this has been addressed as well in a lecture on positional play. But
I think it
I
was
think about it a
Kathy's
little
lecture.
differently. Yeah, it was Kathy's lecture. Yeah.
Back in the day.
But to think about it differently in a tournament when you're in South 2 or South 3, you can use those hands to prepare yourself to be where you want to in all last rather than just playing a hand like you normally might. So if you can win something cheaper, for example, and get 12,000 points away or 10,000 points away from your nearest competitor, you're protected from mangan sumo. So you won't lose placement in that last hand if they're not the dealer. I mean, all these things have to have a consideration as to whether the person's going to be Oya or not. But
Yeah. And a key part of that as well is just being able to have just a general idea on where the score situation is. You don't have to do it perfectly, but if you can just, eyeball someone's .6, or even just like you're allowed to ask for a score check at any time. Anything of that nature really just will the more information you can get, the more you're going to be able to make informed decisions as you get to the end of the game in terms of where you want to situate yourself so that you have the best chance of getting whatever your goal placement for that game is.
yeah, a good example would be like the second bullet point, like getting within an amount with a smaller hand, make a mangan sumo possible. If you have a hand where you have a good weight, but you're only going to win maybe Riichi Pinfu, but it puts you within 8K, 10K of your point competitor, it might be better to prioritize win rate, especially if you don't know where the Dora are and other things. You want to like just get within range and then try to win the next hand too. I mean, these are all generalizations, so every hand is going to be different. You have to play the hand in front of you, but things
Yeah,
just
and
to
a
keep in mind.
and a pretty big part of this lecture is just going to be like we know that a lot of this is not necessarily high chance stuff. That's why it's bad hands for the most part. But you might as well play to maximize your conditions. And at the bottom here, we've kind of just listed like some really common like things that you can aim for in terms of like scores and wins for score conditions. Like so 330 sumo, like you're really normal, just like Riichi Sumo Tanyao, Riichi Sumo Dora, something like that. It's gonna be a 5,000 point swing versus non-dealer, and a 6,000 point swing versus the dealer. That's like a really huge one to be in range of at the end of the game because that's just a hand that can come together pretty naturally, or even just like Riichi Sumo Ura. Mangan Sumo, 10,000 for non-dealer, 12,000 for dealer. 420 sumo, just Riichi Sumo Pinfu, Dora, or something like that. Like not Dora and Ura, but one of those. Obviously, to note, 20 Fu Sumo is only on Pinfu. It's a 6,500 point swing to non-dealer and a 7,800 point swing to dealer. Another thing to note is that is the exact same score in sumo condition as 3 Han 40 Fu. we don't really touch on 40 fu sumos as much in this, just because they're not like they're a little bit luck based. They're not like as luck based, but a lot of the times you'll need an Anko of an Akadora or an Anko, or sorry, an Anko of Akadora, an Anko of a terminal to make 40 fu happen, unless you're going open. And then to round it out, Hanemon Sumo is 15k, 18k to non-dealer and dealer, and Sumo Chitoi without Dora but with Riichi is 8,000 to non-dealer, which is nice and easy to remember, but 9,600 to non-dealer, which is less so.
Interesting point there is you can quickly remember these. You can quickly remember a lot of these, that the swing to the dealer is the same thing the dealer would win. If people recognize that pattern, like a dealer Hanemon is 18,000, but if you sumo a Hanemon against the dealer, the point swing is 18,000. So, and that kind of follows for all of these.
Yeah, that's a nice little just mental thing to make it easier.
We'll jump ahead to the next slide, and this is just more additional things to look out for, that when the game is proceeding, every home that's on the table will add a 400-point swing on its sumo and a 600-point swing on roll. And this is since the home bar evenly split, the dealer doesn't pay anymore. This is for every player. So they keep that into account. And extra Riichi sticks in the pot need to be considered. That's points you just get. They're not subtracted from somebody else. They've already come out of their pot. So it's just an extra 1,000, 2,000, how many ever there are. And if you aren't in fourth, it's also important to keep in mind how close the players behind you are and what they'll need to overtake as well, because then you're playing a game where you're racing at that point. You want to make sure if you have a big score gap to overcome to make a placement go up and from like second to first, but third is right behind you, you may want to prioritize speed, because losing that placement is like losing 10,000 points in the way the UMA is set up for Riichi Nomi Open.
Yeah, and then also just to note, the next point we have is like if you're behind, like you're typically going to be skewed a little bit more towards pushing, just by nature of you need as many chances as possible to get your points back. However, this is a cumulative format, and there are point brackets for everyone. So just remember, like an early like small fourth isn't that bad of a result. Like it's obviously not ideal to lose your first game, but you don't need to like make your first loss, like minus 75 by pushing to try to get by pushing into dealer Riichis, trying to fight for hands that just aren't there. And then the last thing we really want to note here, and it's really going to be important, especially in the Riichi Nomi Open with so many tables and so many players, South 4 is not always going to be all last. You have to consider the timer and how much time you have left in the rounds. Like when you start getting to like 10 minutes left, you should start thinking it's like, okay, this is your South 2, South 3, even if you're still in like East 4. Start trying to set yourself up to be in the best position possible so that you have the easiest way of achieving what you want in the last hand.
Okay, moving on. So this is kind of what Max and I threw together a Haipai checklist and things to think about when you flip up your hand. And if it doesn't necessarily need to be if it's bad, it's just what you should look at the beginning. And you want to like,
and what we're looking for
score
specifically, like when we were trying to make a
yes.
But
it's kind of a mangan. We kind of call this the mangan checklist. I didn't call it that here, but like because a lot of times the mangan will be what you need to overtake, and it's not necessarily easy to make, but there are a lot of ways to make it.
Yeah. So first things first, just like what score do you need? Like for your direct placement up, how many points do you need, and how can you get those points? Can I sumo something? Because it's always going to be different values, right? Like how much can I run an unrelated player for? How much do I need to sumo for? And how much can I run my direct competitor for? The next thing you look at is just what is the Dora? Can it be easily used? And the other thing to note about scoring is for Riichi Nomi and all tournaments, for the last hand, everyone is required to count their score. So you will have exact knowledge of what you need, regardless of how well or not well you've been keeping track. Because honestly, it's just really hard. It is really hard to keep track of everyone's scores while you're playing. But yeah. So then you set your score conditions in your head, make it easier, but also just be prepared to react to Riichi sticks as they enter the table. What's the Dora and how can you use it? The Dora is the easiest way to create value, especially in terms of a hand that doesn't have much. And then, do you have any opening chances? Do you have like a pair of Dora? Is it possible to pawn it and still win? Is it possible to chi? or pawn anything and still get to the point value that you're aiming for. Because obviously closed hands are typically worth more than open hands, but open hands are going to be faster. So if we can get there open, we want to attempt to.
And then the next part with it, what we're looking at, kind of what 2-han or more Yaku are available. Those ones that go down to 1, obviously we're implying that you keep it closed here, unless you have some other value to make up for it. But with Sanchoku, Sanchoku and Itsu easily stack with Pinfu, and then you with Riichi and Sumo, you've made Mangan. And you can enforce that with as few as 4 or 5 tiles in good draws. Obviously, if the hand is great in other ways with efficiency, you might have to throw away some things to make your Mangan. We'll talk more about that later. But you can. It's important to note to keep in mind when you have like 4 or 5 tiles to Itsu or Sanchoku that you keep the right floaters when you don't have all the blocks that allow good luck to happen and make those shapes. And then next would be Honitsu or Chinitsu. Since this is Akaari, it's a little bit different. Like when you're playing normal Akanashi WRC, trying to force the Honitsu or the Chinitsu in the suit of the Dora looks very threatening, and in the other suits it doesn't look. Chinitsu's obviously always a threat, but Honitsu, if it just looks like a Bakuhon, it's not going to scare people away. However, with the Akadora, it does change things quite a bit. It makes it 39 or 5,200 points. It's opened, and that might be what your requirement is. So instead of having Bakuhon of 2-han hand, you will get 3-han and be able to make your goal because you're holding the Aka. Next would be Chitoi or Toy Toy. Obviously, one Toy has to remain closed, but there's Riichi Sumo chances, Ura chances. Dora will always come in 2s. And
personally, I prefer my toys closed as well.
Don't we all? But and then Chanta or Junchan is another option, but these are just noting where the value can come from, because if you have a lot of like bad shapes toward the outside, you might want to think if your hand is all penchans, then Jinchan Sanchoku might be on the table, for example, and just playing with that. And finally, does the hand make sense to possibly have a Dora Tanki? Because if you reach Itsumo Dora 2, no one's going to throw the Dora after you Riichi, but as an attempt
really,
to make a Mangan out of nothing, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, Dora Tanki is a great way to make a Mangan out of nothing, and you'll kind of see a hand like playing towards like being able to do that. Because if a hand builds without forming a pair, then just start thinking about Dora Tanki, even if it's like a one cut west or something, which honestly is like, pretty good weight. But you're aiming to sumo when you're doing that because we're trying to make manga. But just if you notice that your hand is getting close to Tenpai and doesn't have a pair, then start heading towards that Dora Tanki. And you can even just like sit Dama and Tenpai for a while and to wait until you have something that's worth reaching. Yeah, my bad, Claire. I did not mean to bring that up. Claire is not a fan of one cut West's weights for deep lore reasons.
Anything else to add, or should we go on?
That was all I had for this.
Okay. Now we've talked kind of a little bit about Cell 2, Cell 3, and now we're going to get into all last itself. Like we've already mentioned, because it's in the tournament setting, you will count your points. You will know exactly what you need, but you could end up in a situation where you have like 0 points, for example. I mean, you can't. There's no busting. Busting will be off, but you could have exactly 0, and even if you win a Mangan, you're not going to get out of last. However, in this format, every point matters. With the cumulative format, you're not necessarily playing to pass someone. And if you have one hand left to do it, if you can pick up 8 points by winning a Mangan, that will nearly eliminate your -10 penalty on the Uma compared to what you would get for getting third.
Yeah.
So
sometimes it's not ladder. Staying in fourth but getting 8 more points is better than staying in fourth and losing 1K to being no 10.
And then another thing of noting that is if you do have like a chance to Yakutem, but you've reached something that has like a Tanyao Takame, or you have a Sanshoku but you miss it, like take the sumo and try for Ura. Yeah, and because getting an Uradora is much higher chance than throwing it back and getting a free 10 sumo, and you might just sumo the same tile again. Is the other problem. So. And we did look at the stats on this, where a hand with no overlap, there's a 32% chance of hitting Dora 1. And by no overlap, I mean it's basically a Pinfu or
so your hand is
all sequences shape and
1 through 9, a 2-3-4 and another suit, and then like an unrelated pair. So the only overlap in the hand is your one pair. So it comes out to about a 36% chance to hit Ura, which is going to
In
be
total, yeah.
which is better at pretty much any point than your Furry Sumo chance, even if you have like a 3-sided weight. I want to say the math on like a Furry 3-sided weights comes out to about the equivalent of like a 5-so Kanchan weight, something like that. That isn't Furry 10. So it's significantly lower than you expect it to be. So you're gonna want to take that 1 in 3 Ura chance. It's like, worst case you don't hit Ura and you still get a couple of points.
And then, like I said, if your Takame was for instance Sanshoku and you don't have a Pinfu, like, and you miss and you hit the other side, Riichi Sumo Ura 1 is still going to accomplish that 330 Sumo, the 5k 6-way swing, and if you have any other Yaku or Dora, then it's Mangan.
Yeah, pretty much what we're saying is like don't pass wins in Riichi unless you're already prepared to at the time of your Riichi and you have a reason for it.
It's very hard. It's very hard to come up with a good reason for passing a win in Riichi unless it's.
I mean, if you have one,
an example might be if you're losing like Junchan Sanshoku and all together by running a 4, you might pass.
Yeah, well, I mean, like a reasonable example could be you have like Riichi Pinfu, and you're like 4,500 points down on someone, and you were looking to like, or maybe you were looking to like direct hit them or like sumo and get her or something. It's like maybe it's okay with like a 3-sided weight. I guess that doesn't really work as well.
Yeah,
no.
the choice of the times are few and far between.
Yeah,
that's I think the big takeaway here is that because like for example the example I gave, if you had a Pinfu Tenpai for Junchan Sanshoku and you got your 4 instead of your 1, well then you're losing 5 Han worth of value. So you can roll the dice and throw it back if you want, because Riichi Sumo Pinfu, if you don't have a Dora, you basically have a 33% chance roughly of getting 5,200 points. You just take the win.
Yeah.
Or if you throw it back, it's Hanuman.
Yeah.
So that's up to you at that point.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the last thing here though, just to note, is when you're getting at the end of the game, if you have a chance to overtake someone, just do it. You're essentially winning a 10,000 point hand plus the value of your hand. And so like the 1k hand that gets you from third to second is worth essentially a Hanuman. So it's not really like worth trying to like maximize points and placements. Like if you can go from third to first, of course, that's quite nice. But going from third to second is going to be like a very, very consistent way to save yourself some minus and earn a lot of like points towards the tournament standings.
We're going to get into a couple examples, I believe, on the upcoming slides. Do we have any questions where we get into there? Because we're going to ask for some discussion and participation.
Yeah, feel free to just type it in the channel chat for this voice channel, or Eric, do you know if there's any like system where they could like raise their hand? I don't know how Discord calls work on a large scale.
I am also not really sure about whether it has that feature like Zoom does.
If you want to type something in the chat for Riichi Nomi, you can just click on the little text bubble up where the speaker is with the lock. Or you can just honestly, you can just unmute and make sure that you're not talking over someone if you have anything. If not, we'll give it a bit and then we'll move on to the examples and the what would you do's and the general audience participation.
And we'll also be talking a little bit, there's a few content slides later about bad Haipai, because we haven't really touched on what to do if the Haipai is awful or lacking in value yet. We've just been really talking about keeping track of your score and what types of hands will get you where you need to go. Doesn't look like we have anything yet, so let's move ahead. So most all of our examples are anonymized, but this one was provided by the illustrious Thursday, so we can take a look at this. And
much appreciated. Thank you very much.
This isn't necessarily a bad Haipai, but you see we're in fourth, in all last fourth place here, and it's pretty close scoreline here.
Yeah, to save people the mental math, it's a 6,200 point gap to third place, who is the West seat, a 7,200 point gap to East Shimocha, who is second place, and it is a 11,800 point gap to first place. So naturally, like a Hanuman would be like the dream here. You win the game. However, like, what do you need? We're asking, what do you need here to overtake and get out of last place? Because that's going to be like the best bang for your buck here in terms of like winning a hand.
This is where we'd love some participation. So anyone who wants to type it, I mean, I'm watching the chat right now, so
yeah, anyone who wants to if anyone's just like put like a hand in there. We're not necessarily looking for like specific hands. We're just looking for like values.
Josh's specific hand listed though is Joshy Boy is one of the
yeah, it'd be a nice.
hands we found on the next page though. That was definitely a.
Yeah, we're not looking at the specific hands just yet. We're just looking at we just want the like values that we need to make sure that we're overtaking a 6,200 point gap to third place.
Can you give an example of that for them?
So I mean, as in like, does 330 sumo overtake here? Does 340 sumo overtake here? Like what sort of and does 330 overtake on wrong? That kind of thing.
We've got some answers. 5,200 point sumo, that would be a 420 or a 340 sumo. That would definitely do it.
And you can do the quick math on that just by like 5,200 sumo means you get 5,200, and then the dealer pays 2,600. So that's a 7,800 point swing.
You're definitely passing the dealer.
Plus
yeah.
Honda.
You'd get second with that actually, but we've looked at this. Unless you run someone here, need sumo that gets you third is going to get you second because the two players are too close together. So we'll get that out of the way right now. It'll reduce the confusion.
Yeah, so it looks like we have gotten the answers in the chat. We've gotten a few people saying 5,200 sumo or 3,900 direct. Another thing you can do is you can run your Toyman for 8,000, or even you can run your Toyman for 64, 350. That'd be fun, or 425 Chitoy, and that would also get second place.
And when we were discussing this, the weird trivia here is actually the minimum sumo to overtake is actually a 270 because it will win by 100 points because of the homba in the middle.
Yeah, well that's.
But you're not. If you get 70 fu with this hand, you've done something wrong with it.
Yeah, or you've just drawn 3 wests in a row or something.
Yeah, something bizarre. But yeah.
Okay, and then let's get into what would our plan be to achieve a Gyakuten or an overtake with this hand. Like, what are we discarding first? What Yaku are we aiming for? And yeah, let's go with that, and then we can move on to the how to play this if we have to get first. People can just feel free to type in chat as they want to.
See some calls for East first. Itsu or Amy 2Han70 doesn't exist. That's the one who got it.
Yeah, that was a fun little Nomi League moment.
with the big homba, the rare 1,700, 2,800, yeah.
So like seeing what you're discarding first, like, is definitely like the first step. However, you should definitely just generally have a plan in mind when you see a hand like this. Some people are mentioning Itsu. Some people are mentioning Pinfu. All very good options.
Cutting, I like the concept of cutting the green dragon to keep both of the Pinfu option pairs. There's a few different things here.
Yeah, there's also the potential to cut like the 5-6 so shape, specifically the 6 so that you can more easily use the red 5 so, and just hard go for Honitsu or Chinitsu.
Looks like we've got a number of answers. Should we skip ahead and discuss our thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think since we put our thoughts on the next slide, so I think we could just pop into that.
Okay.
After
talking about it, we thought it was kind of a mistake to cut 5-6 so here because if you tunnel vision on a Honitsu, unless you have to pick up 1K, 2K sumo is not going to be enough. So you either need to make a manhon, which is going to be very obvious after a while. If you start drawing manzu and drop those two, there's going to become obvious. And if you would need to pick up an itsu otherwise. So I did see in the chat, itsu,
Yeah.
honitsu, hatsu. That would be enough. Yeah, that's totally fine. But I think that's a long shot. Like unless you draw the hatsu very soon,
Yeah.
it's not
It's also worth
gonna
noting that
come
like
together.
the potential outcomes we put in there aren't necessarily like the only things you can do. This hand has pretty easy access to 2 red 5s and both the red 5 so and the red 5 pin, and we can even force around the red 5 mon. It's also not impossible to just take in the 2 so Dora and incorporate that into a shape. And if we're dreaming of first place, then I think going for the Chinitsu is a little bit like more justifiable. But I mean, when you have something where you just need like Riichi Pinfu Sumo Ura, or even just like Riichi Pinfu like direct hit plus Ura or Ipatsu. Another thing to note: anywhere we put Ura can be substituted with Ipatsu, Haite, Hote, anything that adds +1. Um, the other thing, note people were like a bit discussing the first discard. I'm actually a fan of cutting west here first instead of east, because you have to keep in mind that in this tournament setting, it's if a dealer wins in South 4, that doesn't mean the game's over, unless you're out of time. So the dealer winning this hand wouldn't actually be that bad of a result for us, because that just gets us another hand to potentially get out of 4th place. So I want
And
to
with the
give
home
them.
with the homba in the middle, it's possible that if West has a bad hand or a cheap hand, they may happily take Nomi and win second place and be happy with their second place Uma, their Gakten, because that Nomi is going to be worth 11,300 points in overall value. And then you lost your chance by holding the Sha and letting them pair it. So that's the flip side. I would just throw the Sha on the first turn, personally, as well.
Yeah, and just a disclaimer, like this is Steve and I's opinion on pretty much everything. There's nothing that says that we are correct. There's nothing that says that we are not correct. So if you like, you're allowed to disagree with us. This is just like what we came to after like looking at the hands and discussing like, okay, how do we think the best way to go about having the most consistent results with this hand is?
So yeah, anybody, if you want to disagree with us, go ahead and type it right in chat, because we're happy to hear it. We are not perfect. I want to learn something too, if I can. So if you see anything, feel free to point it out.
Yeah. Okay. I think that is just about everything we had to say about this hand. It's just like, it's really just avoid tunnel visioning. If you can keep just like a wide range of vision on your hand, you can a lot of options will become available to you that you didn't necessarily see. But if anyone has anything else to say, go for it. Otherwise, we will just move on to what our next section was.
Actually, we got a comment from Quincy saying that if first is a must, go for Menhon or Chinitsu. I think the Chinitsu is perfectly reasonable
Yeah.
for first. I mean,
Yeah. The biggest thing about going straight for Honitsu is just that like we can't really pull Nahatsu. So that
yeah,
that just becomes awkward. Or if you can pull Nahatsu, then you're locking yourself into getting either the red 5 or Itsu. Which is very doable, but it's not like as comfortable as it could be just because we have the pair of 6-pin without really like any backup pair.
and the 6,000 to 7,000 point gap means you can't really run Honitsu Nomi Open either. It's not enough points to overtake. So
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead. This is another one from one of Max's games, but
this
I'm
is
going
one of
to
my
discuss
games.
this one pretending it's South 3. So I know it's East 3 in the picture, but let's suppose we're going to be going into all last next hand. And what's the
So first things
best options
first,
might be here?
we're 6,400 points down of 3rd place, but we're also like relatively like within range of winning the game if we can get like back-to-back solid hands. That's another thing about playing in tournaments is that you're gonna have a lot of you're gonna that's another thing about playing in tournaments is that you're gonna have to win in a tournament, you need to get really lucky and you need to high roll, which means you need to probably win about half to 70% of your 10 games in Riichi Nomi. Yeah, so if you're just like looking at this, like what do you see here in terms of Yaku that we can aim for, or Dora that we can aim for that give us the most like potential value? Again, pretending that this is South 3. It's hard to get perfect screenshots from a limited sample of the latter games I was willing to scroll through.
I mean, this isn't exactly a Haipai either, but this is probably the first decision-making point because
Yeah.
the
So
East and the one pin flow out very naturally.
Yeah, we're not really asking for a discard just yet. We're really just looking for like, okay, what like hands do you see here that could potentially happen? Like we discussed like two Yaku earlier, you know, do you see any of those that we can go for? Do you see what value buffs do you see in this hand?
In the chat, I see
Yeah,
calls for Sanshoku. I see a lot of 2-3-4
yeah.
Sanshoku, which is definitely something that Max and I saw as well.
Yeah, 234 Sanshoku is something that pops up here. Saw someone saying we should need to keep the 7-so around because it is the Dora. You know, we can always bring up Dora Tonki.
I see some
Into
saying hope for
Ipeiko.
Ipeiko, but hope for Ipeiko is challenging with the Dora.
Yes, that is the thing here, is that the Dora is already worth as much as the Ipeiko. And so if you get a 6-so here, you're going to be pretty likely to just be using that 4-so as your pair or something.
See a comment from Melissa, the shape is horrible for Sanshoku. Well, it's not great. I mean, it's 3
Yeah.
Kanchans, right?
Yeah.
So
But like it's something, you know? Like I mean
it's
could potentially be Riichi Sanshoku Dora, or even just like Sanshoku Dora if you want to Dama it, maximize your win rate. Or even just like Riichi Sanshoku and maybe the Dora just doesn't fit in. That's definitely like the way that we've seen most people approach this in terms of the responses. But like 5,200 points here is a pretty significant deal. You know, that puts you within range of winning a one Han sumo and getting out of last place and all last, while also putting you within range of hitting a mangan off of anyone and winning the game. Because that gets you to within that, or not a mangan off of anyone, but it does get you within range of sumoing a mangan and winning the game.
kind of waiting for any other messages in chat. If anybody else wants to type now what they might cut first here. Now
Yeah.
we had some discussion on that earlier and I saw a few different options, but
Yeah, there's also one more potential value out that I haven't seen anyone bring up.
yes, it's true.
Yeah, don't think
No,
don't think we're
Chitoy.
thinking about Chitoy. I think this hand's a little bit too good to be thinking about Chitoy, unless it happens like very naturally. I did see someone bring it up though. There is like we do have 6 tiles to a yeah. We do have 6 tiles to a Manzuitsu, which is like possible. There's also the potential to just shift this, like was just said, to like a Pinfu Dora 1 or something. It's not necessarily the easiest thing because you have to fill in a couple of Kanchan before Ryanman, but it's not impossible either.
I mean, and then in the natural flow of the game, you can pick up an 8-so. You can pick up a 5-pin, and then Pinfu is in sight. It's like it's the Pinfu Express at that point. You're just play efficiently, and you're going to get one. But for now, it's definitely doable.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like this isn't all last, so we can win like anything here, and it'll improve our situation. We don't have to necessarily force things. However, if you have the opportunity to, this is definitely the time to get as much out of this hand as we can.
All right, I'm gonna skip ahead now, and feel free to keep commenting. But we're gonna go to just the next slide is the same thing, just with our thoughts on it.
Yeah, so we
Oh,
didn't.
no,
We didn't
never
actually
mind.
put,
This is
yeah,
the
yeah.
actual.
Yeah, so like there's the Manzu Itsu that was brought up, which is like
Hmm.
it's a little bit awkward to see because of the way Tenho lines up your hand.
I think that's one thing that nobody pointed out is that this current hand accepts all the Akadora.
That is, yeah, that's also
One of the
case.
things we noticed in our analysis of this is that
Yeah, it's very easy to use all 3 red 5s, which is just like an easy Dora cheat. The 234 Sancho, who a lot of people touched on. Honestly, we should have just put Pinfu in there as well. Like, you know, Riichi Pinfu Dora 1, very doable. Michael
I think
asked
we tend to leave the Pinfu out just because Pinfu is kind of your reward for efficient play.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're doing things that are slightly against efficiency, you may not end up with it.
Yeah, and Michael's also bringing up that, or asking, like, if you take this hand, like, in this situation to, like, Riichi Nomi bad weight, Like, I don't think, at least for me personally, I don't think I would play this hand in a way that lets me get to Riichi Nomi with a bad weight. I think I would always have at least something of a Yaku or a Dora in this hand by the time it gets to Tenpai.
Yeah, I mean you'd have to end up with a position where you'd throw away your Dora when you Riichi, and you'd have to like lose 5-so to really do that, or draw another 5-so and then not take the Kanchan. There's not very many ways to end up with that. Why would you throw our precious Dora? I mean, the Dora is very precious in this hand.
Yes. So the biggest, so yeah, so a lot of people chimed in on it as we were discussing. What would you do? I think Steve and I came to the general consensus that we want to cut 4-so on this. We want to keep we want to keep as many options open as possible. Just kind of like harkening back to the last hand as well. We don't really want a tunnel vision. We want to see 2-3-4 Sanshoku. We want to see Manzu Itsu. It's if we happen to draw like a 6-so or something, and all of a sudden we don't really have a pair in the hand anymore. That's not really that much of a backfire. You know, you can just play out the 2-so then, and find your pair anywhere else. You're plenty likely to find a pair before this hand makes it all the way to
I'm
10-5.
going to respond to chat. Is that Conflict Dog's asking, is it crazy that I want to cut 9-mon? And I understand the temptation to cut 9-mon for a Tanyao here, but if you draw a 6, which actually makes you shift to Tanyao, you're just going to want to go for the Itsu at that point, because you'll need 2 more tiles. You'll need the 1 and the 3.
Yeah. At that point, like, say after we cut 4-so, we draw Fremont, you know. And all of a sudden we are left with this situation where we can just try to like figure out what like value we want. And you can even just play Vidora there. Is then we're Ishanten for 2-3-4 Sanshoku, but we also then, if we draw 1-mon or 6-mon, we can play out one of our Kanchans and go for the Itsu.
It's a pretty flexible shape. And another thing to think about is if you played this if you played out the most redundant tile in the hand, it's probably the 2-mon here.
Yeah.
And you are going to get Riichidora 1, basically, maybe Pinpu at the max.
Because being asked why go for Sanshoku over Ipeko. The thing with Ipeko here is that most of the time, this 4-4-5-5 so shape is going to end up being like one of those is going to end up being our pair a lot of the time. However, there's also just the added like awkwardness to if we drew 6-so right now, are we really looking at Ipeko? No, we're looking at, we have a 4-pin pair and a 5-6-7 so shape with an extra 5-so.
Yeah, it's really hard. Getting Ipeko here would require throwing the Dora or having some sort of waiting on the Dora where you already are holding like 4-4-5-5-6-6-7, where you're waiting on 4-7, but then it's just not. I mean, the odds aren't great. That's just a horrible wait in this situation as well, because people aren't going to be throwing those tiles. You can sumo it, of course, but
Yeah. And we're also being asked, like, is it possible to switch this over to South 3 and just plug it into Naga, which is possible. However, I think Naga is going to lean pretty heavily towards Tumon because, like, the positional nuance of this isn't necessarily, like, if we're playing this as a ladder game, then, like, Tumon makes a lot of sense. Just try to, like, maximize winning this hand, get as much stuff as possible out of it because your goal is to avoid last. However, this is a lot of times where the key difference between playing in a tournament and playing on ladder is going to end up coming through, because this is not a game that's impossible to win. It's actually a game that's like fairly possible to win, especially if we can win a hand like worth as much as 52 here. So I'm not necessarily like needing to maximize my win rate here. I am also looking for like a similarly good win rate while also having chances to set myself up in the best position for all last.
yeah, I mean, I suspect Naga will cut Mon in ladder unless you could tailor it to the rule set somehow and make it learn it. Then it might still cut 4-so, and maybe Naga cuts 4-so anyway. I have no idea, but I'm sure it's possible to code it. I do not have the know-how to do that. I don't even use Naga at all. I have people do it for me.
Yeah, it's also just like this is Mahjong. There's when stuff's like this close, it's very just kind of like nitpicky and nuancy on what we think is the best discard. Because honestly, like you might get draws that just give you nothing. You might get draws that give you everything you want. But we're just trying, like, the purpose of this is just really, we just wanted people to see all of the options that are available to them, and so that they can make the most informed choices possible in these endgame scenarios.
Because, for example, if you play the Forso here and then my next draw is the Dora, for example, then I'm cutting the Tumon and just playing full efficiency at that point, because then I've got Dora 2.
Yeah, and it's not even that bad of a backfire, really, because then you just
No.
have, like, then you've lost Forso as acceptance.
Yeah. That's the other thing we discussed. We looked at this at length, and cutting Forso here only loses Forso itself. Everything else still fits in nicely. And
yeah, if you draw 6-0, then you're headless for a bit, but you've got plenty of time. Or anyway, let's I guess move on unless anyone else has anything they want to touch on.
Another changing venues here to Mahjong Seoul, but we have another hand for discussion. This is an all-last hand. We're not in fourth here. This is a crucial difference, and this hand is just lacking value. So the shapes aren't bad.
Yeah, it's a nice hand.
It's a great Haipai, actually. We'd be happy to see this earlier in the game, but when you can get what you want to do now.
So first things first, what do we need, like, in terms of score-wise to get first place in this game? Like, what works for sumo, what works for direct hit, what works for rolling someone else? And a couple of people are chiming into the chat, and, like, probably the best way to get first place with this hand is going to be mangan sumo. And this is, so it's a little bit of just like a, you know, are you paying attention? It's, you can see we're 11,000 points down from Toyman, the player across from us, but there is the Riichi stick in the middle. So with the Homba.
And the Homba, which pushes the swing up to 11-4.
Yep.
So it's enough, but only if you're paying attention. If you just looked at this point gap and been like, okay, mangan sumo's not enough, but the Riichi stick and the Homba make all the difference here.
Yeah. Oh, I did see someone bring up that the snake cuts Forso. Vindication. No. Did see someone bring up that we do win a tiebreak. That is another part of playing tournaments that's going to be different. Tiebreaks in real life tournaments typically tend to split the UMA.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's still getting a +10 instead of a +5. But if you can overtake, you get because you're splitting. You're splitting. In this case, if you tie for first, you get a +10 UMA instead of 15-5. Each player gets the same.
Yeah, because they're honestly, like, the fact that there is seat tiebreak is kind of silly, if I'm honest. But there has, like, you can't just have Mahjong not be a zero-sum game where there's not always a loser. That'd be silly.
Oh, we've got a few.
Can you imagine playing ladder tying for third and you just both lose? But so, like, this hand, like, you can see it, we have, like, the nice 5-6-7 shape. We've got, like, a couple of, like, mediocre floating tiles. We have a pair of east, which we can use for pinfu, because we are not east and it is not east. So if we're playing for first place, or, like, how are we going to approach this hand, just in general, really? Is you can try to make it first place, but as you can see, it's not necessarily super easy to get points out of his hand.
Because Riichi Sumo Pinhu Ura, for example, is the hand we keep talking about, is not going to cut it because it's not a mangan. It's 5,200.
Yep. Tanya Pinfu's
we did get a comment about the 4,000 direct hit. 4,000 direct hit will swing 8,000 points, so it is not enough to win.
Yeah. However,
I guess it swings 86 plus you get one more 1,000, so it's not going to close the gap. However, I think 5,200 does it.
52, it will be 55. Yeah, so 340 direct will be enough, or 340 or more. Because 52, it adds up to 10-4, and then you add 600 for the Homba, and you tie, and then you have the extra Riichi stick.
Several people are typing. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've got Homer saying Tanya Pinfu is a way to, like, get as much value out of his hand as possible, because that is a way to do it. Like, you could get, like, Riichi Sumo Tanya Pinfu Ura. We can go for Tanya Sanshoku Pinfu Riichi, or even just, like, Sanshoku Pinfu Riichi is going to be enough with Sumo.
And then Simon's pointed out the Aka acceptance isn't bad, which is true. Like this hand accepts, again, this hand accepts every Akadora.
Yeah,
So that's
Ipatsu is
easy
always
way.
an option. Or Bomb's always an option. There's never like 0% chances.
We mentioned that earlier. Anytime we say Ura, Ipatsu is an option because if you're getting Ura, you've Riichi'd. So
yeah, just do the latter. Just do the Ipatsu.
Okay, so I think we'll jump to the next slide so we don't make this too long, and I'm going to discuss what we were thinking about it. We call this situation good shapes but no value. We don't really have the value here. And another thing to note is sometimes your best decision is just to be happy with second place, depending on what you draw. Like if you make no progress, like don't force it. Because plus, like the second place, let's go back to the slide. The second place is fine. You're still
you're
30 keys
like
up. You're still getting +9 here if you don't lose anything.
Yeah, very very reasonable. Very very chill, like net positive game that will leave you like in the top half of people for that round.
And then another comment from Simon in the chat is that just winning and not getting placement is still gaining points and stopping others from making your points, which is something I think something we touch on later.
Yeah, it's just like every hand you win is a big hand that someone didn't win, potentially.
We got a lot of these responses from the chat already. You can aim to create a mangan from nothing by getting 2 out of 3 of Ipatsu, Tsumo, or Uradora, with the Riichi.
Yeah, it's like if you want to go back to this the slide real fast, like say we draw the red 5 mon, it's like it's a little bit of an awkward kanchan, but like it's something, and then we naturally fill into Tenpai, we play out our 8 mon, we play out our 8 so, we play out our Hatsu and Shun, we draw like 4 pin or like 1 pin and 4 so we don't really have like an easy our Tanyao shift's not as good. Like you can still just Riichi this with like 3 mon and red 5 mon and just try to aim for like sumoing the kanchan. Or even just like knowing that 3 Han 40 Fu is enough to overtake. Like if your Toyman has a good hand in a cumulative score format, first place doesn't always fold. So our Toyman might play out that 4 mon if they're pushing a reasonable hand. They are the North seat with the North Dora. Maybe they have value. And then if you hit 1 Ura, all of a sudden you're winning the game. So like even just like a Riichi Dora 1, that if it isn't Pinfu, can just be, or actually or even just like Riichi Dora 1 with Sumo and Ura is a manga, because we're rounding up.
Yeah, for example, if you picked up another, I don't know how we do it, but yeah, if you just picked up a kanchan, so it's not a Pinfu, that'd be it. The red 5 mon is the perfect example here.
Yeah. Okay, anyway.
Back to the slide. Another thing to do is this is in general, you want to maintain blocks or floaters with Dora or Akadora acceptance that are reasonably efficient. By reasonably efficient, you might keep a floater that can give you some value that is not necessarily the best floater in the hand, but it has good odds. We're talking about this going back to the slide again. I'm going to go back and forth a lot here. That
blame Maj, so we couldn't get the screenshot to be any smaller.
If you were to draw something like a couple turns in, and you draw a tile that makes after you've cut maybe your green dragon and your red dragon, thinking they're not going to help you. If you draw something that makes a shift to a 6, 7, 8 Sanshoku a chance, for example, I might cut the 3 mon, even though it's a better floater, before I cut the 8 mon.
Yeah, like if we
3 mon is your Aka acceptance as well, so it's a balancing act, right?
Yeah, like if we draw 7 so here or 8 pin, then you can hold on to tiles like 8 mon and 8 so a little bit longer than you normally would. Just like try to give yourself that hedge, because like the acceptance on 8 mon isn't that much worse than the acceptance on 3 mon. Like it is worse, don't get me wrong, but when we're trying to hit for as much value as possible, then minor efficiency sacrifices can be made in the name of, but if we get lucky. Because that's really what we're aiming for here. It's just like, how do we put ourselves in position to take advantage of good luck?
Anyway, next point is that if you waste time with poor blocks hoping for Dora, but it's going to allow your opponents to outspeed you. And I'm talking about Dora that are hard to use. Like if you have
like the North in this,
Yeah, like the North, or if Dora was a 1, 2, or 3, and you're sitting around with a Penchon, That might be good
you're
enough. If
sitting
you have
around.
better blocks, though, you may just want to, like I said, being happy enough with second place. Because you don't want the dealer to win and overtake you, and then you just get another hand, and then the worst case scenario is the dealer wins, overtakes you, and then last place wins and overtakes you. Then you're in fourth.
Well, I don't think
That's
we're very much in danger of last place overtaking us, but like second place is or third place is very much within striking distance. They're within
yes.
dealer mangan range. That's typically your danger zone of just like of thinking you're in danger of being overtaken if you're within mangan range of someone.
And as I point out in the bullet here, is that if you're overtaken, that's like you dealt into 10,000 points, because that's the amount of the UMA you're losing.
Pretty bad.
But yeah, not great.
Yeah.
And as was mentioned, if you win a quick hand, people aren't taking your points, and people aren't winning potential big hands. And we've touched on this a couple times, but all your hand needs is one han worth of a non-pinfu Yaku or a Dora for a mangan chances. And with Riichi Tsumo, that Dora or that one han plus something or a
Ipatsu
anyway.
Haite. Yeah. It happens.
Okay. So I'm going to keep us moving forward because trying to keep this not too long, but we want to talk about what to do with bad Haipai now. A lot of the ones we've seen so far have been good,
okay.
reasonable to good shapes, pretty good hands. But say you get to the end of the game or even in the middle of the game and your hand is awful, what do you do with it? And I think I want to point out to people is when your Haipai is really bad, it's hard to play it normally. Like you follow the normal efficiency rules and cut your floaters and redundant tiles and it's a bunch of bad blocks. Because the Haipai is slow, you're not going to get to 10 by first often enough. And you're not going to have not a lot of value and sometimes not a lot of safety if you play it normally. And you can't justify pushing and then you're in a pretty much full beta ori situation. You're not winning the hand anyway. And another thing to note is in a tournament when it's all cumulative, don't kill yourself by dealing in. You don't win the race to 10 by you draw a bunch of bad tiles. And playing these things with full efficiency, you'll just end up with a bad value and a bad weight at the end. So what can we do when the hands are bad? That's what we're going to discuss in the next slides.
Yeah. So here we have in front of us, like, this hand is absolutely terrible. It's like this is like one of the worst starting hands you could possibly have. It is 8 unique types, so there's not the Kokushi chances are low, but not like untenable. You know, like I've seen worse hands get Kokushi, but there's not like any good blocks. Even if we do accept the Dora here, it's very awkward.
Just for the chat, we're not going to be talking about pushing Kokushi at all. Not every bad hand has to be a Kokushi. Like obviously we all know what that is.
Yeah. And this is honestly one of those where like you probably can start off playing this for Kokushi. But like I think every Kokushi start should have like a backup idea. Because it's just not that likely. And in this case it wouldn't even get us first place unless we sumoed it. Yeah, so we're within mangan range of last place, but we're at that awkward 62 number where we need like at least 340 to overtake on sumo or a 330 wrong. It's just like what's the best way to just try to like achieve any amount of value with this? Yeah, we see like Yaku high, a lot of Kokushi, but like, and let's talk like maybe where do you think we start here? What do you think is like a good idea of like the first couple discards that we want to make? Because honestly, like everything you do with a hand like this is just gonna be draw dependent. You know, like what can we discard here that maximizes the most draws that can actually get us some value out of this hand? Yeah, we see like Shanta Sanshoku. I'm seeing like we have a little bit of Dora acceptance, so we want to hold on to this one. So we've got someone cutting Pinzu first. So we have someone cutting 5-mon first. I see a West. Yeah, another option, you know, just give tiles to the dealer, who is our East player, by the way. We are the North seed here. It's hard to get 10 to show. I harvard the scores because this isn't actually all last. Spoilers.
Yeah, we're pretending it's all last. It's not.
It's hard to get perfect examples, all right?
Yeah, we comb through many games.
Yeah. We have 9-mon.
some honor tile choices. I don't think there's anything wrong with starting with some non-kokushi tile and keeping kokushi open, just keeping that out there. I think we mentioned that already, but
Yeah, I think this is definitely a hand where I would probably like start going kokushi and just like, but what are we hedging while we try to do kokushi? Because there's a couple options that we could get here.
so shall we move on to?
Yeah,
We'll move
so
on
I
to our
think
thoughts on
I
it.
think actually go back a little
Oh,
bit.
this is the outcome.
Yeah, this
but
was
we,
the outcome. Yeah, so go back for a sec.
yeah, we
So
can
I
talk
think
about
like
what we.
yeah, I think we both generally agree that like starting with like something like 5 mon makes a lot of sense because like the easiest way to create like any amount of value out of this hand is probably Honitsu or Chanta, but like Chanta requires like a lot of very specific draws and a lot of very bad shapes to fill, whereas like Honitsu is openable and we have 3 different Yakuhai that could pair to all of a sudden have have at least a running out. And if you can get Honitsu like Yakuhai Dora 1, then you can win off of anyone. So like the Manzu, first of all, is definitely the worst suit for the Honitsu because it's not the Dora suit and it doesn't have the interconnected tiles of the Pinzu. So
Yeah,
like
no, I
and
think we
then
mentioned this earlier, but Honitsus are a bit more playable in every suit since this tournament will be Akaari. But
Akari being
if you
with red
play,
fives.
yes, if you play in Akanashi formats, if you can't force with a bad Haipai, if you can't force a Honitsu in the Dora suit, you probably shouldn't be forcing the Honitsu at all
Yeah,
with a bad
because
Haipai.
the best you're getting out of a Honitsu is like usually 3,900, unless your hand is good enough that you have a Mangan Honitsu, and then it's not really a bad hand. You have 2 Yakuhai, or you have like Honitsu Itsu or something with a Yakuhai. But yeah, so it's like we want to hedge the Dora suit, we want to hedge Chanta, like all these ideas that you guys came up with, like playing 5mon lets us keep the most of them alive. And then, so this is how the hand ended up.
Yeah, another thing to think about here is it's perfectly reasonable if you think, okay, I want to cut 2 mon instead because the red 5 mon exists. It's going to be pretty difficult to figure out what to do after that. But if you can get a Yakuhai with 2 Dora, you're going to have to hold on to that 1 for dear life unless you draw another Aka.
Yeah,
But
so
that's
like if we
another
draw, yeah, if we
option
want to
here.
dream of the red 5 acceptance, then yeah, like we can start with 2mon, then play like something like West or 9mon
Or even
anything
playing
like
two
that.
pin, even because you're obviously the Honitsu focus is going to be in Tozu.
Yeah. Well, I
So
mean, if we draw like 3 pin, 5 pin to start the hand, like I think
oh,
you can
that's yeah,
go
of
for.
course. But
Yeah, yeah. It's like
anybody
again,
can
these hands are
just fill
very
your
yeah,
Ryokan on both sides. Anybody
yeah,
can do it.
easy. These hands
All
are
right.
just very draw dependent when they're this bad. You can't
Yes.
really. You have to just kind of go with what the game wants you to have. So this is where we ended up. By the way, I did end up getting like a Yakuhai, and we did have a potential for like we had like Honitsu Chanta here potentially, with 2 Yakuhai, like they paired up. We were able to pawn one of them, but we see on the right the dealer Riichi, and we're still not particularly close. This is one of those situations where like there's no need to suicide here, but we can also maybe make natural progress because like we have Chun that's been discarded twice, so we can probably push that into the dealer Riichi. We have Hatsu that's Genbutsu, we can probably push that into the dealer Riichi. We have we have one so that's Genbutsu. We can probably play that into the dealer Riichi. 9 so probably a little bit aggressive for my taste. Same with Easts. Yeah, you never know when someone else is randomly dumb with Tenpai on a Genbutsu. But the
Well, they're
biggest
done
thing
with
is
Senpai on Hatsu, you have some problems, but
yeah, true.
but
But yeah, but like you can
yeah.
see also from like the initial discards is that up until the point where this started calling, you see all these the lid up tiles on Tenho means that they were discarded from our hand. Like we did keep that Kokoshi alive for as long as possible until like the hand started kind of being more, this is probably more playable open. An added benefit to a hand like this is if you don't see this hand and you see, a 7/8/9 chi and a south call, like with no Sozu discarded and a west overflowed, like you gotta respect my hand a little bit if you're my opponent.
And then this is obviously where did this game come from?
This was Armel.
Okay. Yeah, and the last place is once again you want to be last, so
Yeah. So yeah. So
they
then,
go
but you
for it.
see,
And it's
like,
also not all last in this example, but if it was all last, the point we're making here is with the dealer Riichi that you're going in a tournament. There's no Agariyame. It doesn't matter what happens if everyone's just going to back away, let the dealer do their thing. You're going to
yeah,
get another hand.
Agariyame being like roughly translated as win stop. So with that, when that is off, like there's none of it, then the dealer does not have the option to stop just because they are winning.
The dealer's also not going to win a hand that's going to put them in first.
Yes,
they're
that's
like
true.
40,000 points away.
Are you saying this isn't Ipatsumo Suwanko?
Yeah, no, it's not. So yeah, and then as we mentioned, we have all these tiles that are very, very likely safe. They're Genbutsu, or we can just throw them away. That when you take the long shot approach like this with the Honitsu especially, and keep your Yakuhai tiles and Jihai, the honor tiles around, you have a lot of folding options.
Yeah, it's like very easy to fold this type of hand. We have like at least 3 tiles that we feel pretty comfortable playing, and then like in that time we'll probably be able to draw more, or we'll have to risk Haku twice, which is still not that bad. But yeah, and then the other thing like is just consider how what you're doing looks like to other players. If they're like someone who's paying attention to me, probably is going to start choking Sozu, and all of a sudden, like you've impacted their hand. Maybe you made them feel threatened by you, so they open their hand instead of reaching. They win like Tanya Dora 1, and that's a potential manga that you just averted. In this case, obviously, that didn't work because the dealer very rarely has reason to care about what other people are doing, especially if they're losing, like in this case. They're just gonna be like, it's my deal. I need points. I will click button. I will click any button that gets me points.
Let's hop ahead.
Yep.
Here's another Mahjong Soul, and this now we're not in all last anymore. So we're now talking about EV thing, but we're looking at a bad Haipai in East. Scores close to flat. Like nobody's above 40,000. This is a game with a 30K start. So
yeah. So like how
this
do
is
we think...
Akari, but we pretend it's Akari anyway. But this is an Akari game regardless.
Yeah. Okay. So there are red 5s. If that was not clear. But yeah, it's like, so how are we approaching this? Like we don't necessarily need to do anything with this hand, but like it's still a hand. We can still try stuff. Like what do we see here that's like a potential route?
Claire, I hate this hand. I didn't like it either.
Yeah, it is certainly not what you hope to see when you open up your hand. I see Yakuhai Dora 1, I see Kokoshi, I see Chitoi.
Kokoshi from 5?
Hey, I mean Dave got it normal, right?
It's not. I'm not Pio. I can't get.
Yeah.
I can't get out of nowhere. I can't manufacture Kokoshis out of nowhere, or Chihos out of nowhere for that matter.
Yeah. Hey, at least it
I got
wasn't
it in there.
Tenho. Yeah. we got our one sanctioned Chiho mentioned.
So Sananko, yeah, that's a chance. We don't mention much, but so a lot of people are saying with all the other than Yakuhai Dora 1, which is of course if I draw a Yakuhai tile, that's an option here for sure. But I have to draw one. I have to pair it, otherwise I'm not getting Yakuhai at all. A lot of people are Chitoitsu, Tsuanko, Sananko. A lot of people are being dreamers.
Yeah,
basically.
a lot of
like
vertical
that with
hands.
This hand.
Yeah,
I like that with this hand.
And then there was also like the one comment of just like, let's progress normally, keep extra safe tiles. I do like the idea of keeping extra safe tiles here. However, like this is something we wanted to bring up. So like where do we end up, if we do play this hand normally most of the time? Like it is not like, I think the average results if we play this hand normally is we end up with like Riichi like Dora 1 if we're lucky and happen to draw an Aka or an 8-pin on like a low quality weight. So this is like the type of hand
bad weight 10-pi on turn 12. Yes. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important to really see. It's just like some hands you really should play with like folding or weirdness in mind. Like in this case, like a lot of people said, potentially Chitoi, which I think is a pretty good idea with even with only 2 pairs. But you don't necessarily want to just start yeeting out all your middle tiles immediately just to pursue that. You have multiple red 5s that you can draw to Chitoi. You have honor tiles that you can keep around as safe tiles or good weights. So with that in mind, like it is like fine to just like start normally with like 9-so or 9-pin. But like you definitely just want to kind of have the preparation to fold this hand at any given time as soon as you feel threatened, whether that be like after someone, like cheese and discards a suspicious tile, after someone reaches, of course.
There's so many floating tiles in this hand that you can be a little bit reactive with it, basically. Yeah. It's like you don't have to it is any one set way. Let's move on to the next slide so we can look at the
Oh,
This is
yeah,
like, we had good shapes, no value. Now we have bad shapes, no value.
yeah. I forgot that we had the slide.
Is it then this example, like we had talked about forcing honitsu. Well, this isn't going to be a honitsu. Like I don't.
Yeah, it's pretty
You'd have
much
to have
perfectly
amazing
split.
draws. The suit that's slim is the Dora suit, so it's like, what are you gonna do? You have two honor tiles. You're not getting a honitsu here. Um, Distribution is just not right for it, and the floating tiles can only accept Dora to make additional bad shapes and pairs. So we look at this, we can accept. I mean, Akka 5 pin just floats. That's obvious here. But the other two Akadora, the red 5s, will make pairs. And then the 8 pin makes a penchant. So we're not getting any good shapes out of those either. But keeping that in mind, we both agree that Chitoi is a very reasonable approach with this hand, since you can always hold on to some safe tiles that would make good weights later. You can always fold with them as well. And that's another thing to keep in mind. Chitoi is generally very easy to fold, but sometimes you end up in a place where your Chitoi Ishan 10, like one away, and you don't have a safe pair to throw. So holding those like good weight once cut honor tiles makes the hand easier to kind of move around, and you don't have to fold right away. Because even if you're cutting a tile you haven't paired yet and you have 5 pairs, you're still going to be Ishan 10. It doesn't matter what it is. So you've drawn an Anko, obviously, but that's an edge case.
Yeah, and I think we're a bit results biased on this one because I think this did end up getting to like Chitoi Ishanten. But it's just kind of just a general note is like just don't just keep a broad perspective. Don't like get too attached to a hand like this. It's still a bad hand. However, like you can start hedging towards like stuff like Chitoi and holding safe tiles like pretty early because there's like
Yeah.
very little merit to playing this hand like unless you draw like exactly like 8 pin, 7 pin, 3 so, 6 so like in order, this hand is going to be trouble to make anything happen with.
Yeah, I believe when I played it, we discussed I started with 9 so, and then I kind of played around the Chitoi idea. And then I hard committed to Chitoi like around turn 7. I'd already drawn a 3 so, and I cut a 2 so when it got cut. So I'd already filled in my penchant, and I threw it away anyway. Because I just didn't have, the hand was not going to get to 10 pi. And I think I had at that point at 4, I had 5 pairs, so I just threw away the 2 so. And then somebody reached, and I just backed away and kind of juggled safe Ishan 10 until someone else dealt in. So it's like I wasn't attached to it. I was ready to fold.
Yeah,
It didn't have any value. It did not acquire any
you can't get
Dora.
attached to your bad hands. That's true. Hanver's disagreeing with Chitoi being easy to fold. I suppose it just kind of is dependent on the tiles you have in it. It's not necessarily always easy to fold depending on what Chitoi tiles you get, but at the very least, if you are folding it, you do get 2 turns of safety. And you have multiple options. So what do you feel is your best option?
Yeah, I think Chitoi is difficult to fold if you played like full efficiency and you're hanging on to 100% live tiles you can't see. You're still 2 Shanten and somebody reaches, then
Yeah.
it's a mess.
Yeah, that is
But
true. You do just generally have less types of tiles. But in turn, you get like more guarantee in terms of safety once one of those tiles passes. All right. Anyway, moving on to I think this should be the last couple of
slides. This is some
points that we have.
concluding ideas for everyone to keep in mind when they're in games. And these about talking about certain Yaku, they can apply if your Haipai is good or bad. You just have to know your score requirements and kind of play your hands as they draw, as they come into them. And
Yeah, that is
everyone's heard.
sorry if I can just interject. That is a recurring theme for a reason here. It's just like you don't need to know how to score perfectly. It's scoring in this game is nonsensical. I know that there's a formula. I have a liberal arts degree. I worked with memorization. But like just committing to memory, like the pretty the ones that we brought up, the common ones, your 330 sumo, your mangan sumo, your 330 wrong, like you should be able to do 3900 times 2 and 7800 for us English majors. Uh just like keeping like those little things in mind, even if you don't know it perfectly, is going to help your like score considerations and what you can play for by a lot when you get to the end these end game scenarios. Because the more you know, the more options you have available to you, and you don't want to be disadvantaged like just by sitting down at the table.
So continuing onward, like we've all heard I think Chitoi as a shortcut to Hanuman is like a meme at this point, or if you have Dora and hit Ura, you get a Baimon. But
This is what
reason for that is if it has any Dora at all, they always come in pairs, and you can make it with no blocks. You can have just scattered garbage, and you can still make a Cheetoy. And
Riichi Sumo Cheetoy, Dora 2. Nice and easy. 12K or 18K. Huge swing.
And then keep in mind when you're looking at those hands that if you have a nice hand that gives you the Sanchoku or Itsu chance, if you have the Pinpu on it as well, you just need a single Dora in the hand or to hit an Ura or get Ipatsu to get a Hanuman. So there's ways to make that big value even with simple. The lowly Pinpu will stack with all these other things to make value you might need. And one of the other big things is I don't think it's going to be as a big of a consideration since there's no cut and they're not really caring about back 10 all the time. But if you absolutely need to buy them on for some reason, there are very, very few reliable ways to get it. And I just wanted to point them out here because the easiest one if you can't get any Dora is the mention closed Chinitsu Chiwitsumo. That'll make 8.
Close Chinitsu, just Riichi and hope for the best.
And
and
then any other Chinitsu in the Dora suit that you can like get 3 Han with the Dora, Tanyao, Itsu, that will make your Baimon. Then after this, Cheetoy, where you have 4 Dora, either with Akka or Kondora, or you flip the Ura, but I'm talking about without Ura. You can have the guaranteed Baimon on Sumo that way. And as the reason I point out the Chinitsu options is that they're obvious. It would be very obvious, but it's least restrictive. Like the other examples I we talked about this Riichi Tsumo Junchan Ryan Peiko sounds ridiculous.
Did we really say Ryan Peiko instead of Sanchoku?
Well,
I mean, they both.
Sanchoku is not.
Yeah, it is.
It's worth 2.
Junchan Sanchoku.
It's worth 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, Riichi Sumo like Ura. Oh yeah, okay, true.
I'm not talking about Ura. We're talking about Doraless
That's true,
things here. These are ridiculous. Like I said, this is like the heavens blessed you with a great hand, and you can be very happy about it. So
can I just get blessed with Tenho instead?
Wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah.
So quick summary. We did talk about like the shortcuts to Mangan, Doratanki Riichi, and
just like in the absolute worst case where like none of these like Yaku building things can happen. Just like, it's always possible to just go for like just Riichi and like, you go for Ura 3, you go for like Haite Sumo, you go for Ipatsumo Ura. Like if you just like cannot think of a way, but like Doratanki always a good shortcut to Mangan. Like if you sumo it, you have a Mangan. You have like just Riichi +1, like we mentioned before, like a 3-mon, 5-mon Kanchan, where the 5 mon's your Akka. If you sumo that and get Ura or Ipatsu or Haite, it's a Mangan. Another note, not every bad hand has to be Kokoshi. I know it's like it's very fun to go for, and it's like, you can feel like, oh, I was so close. But like Kokoshi gets exponentially harder to progress the closer you get there. You always really want to have like a backup plan on that, whether that be like, Chanta, Junchan, Cheetoy, always options. And then the last thing here is like, don't lose points chasing the Ipatsu. Chasing the Ipatsu. Well, yeah, that too. But don't lose points chasing the impossible. It's like this whole lecture is about like, okay, what do we do with like bad hands or bad situations? Which is just like you have to remember, like these are bad for a reason. Like we're talking about ways to make our like 5% win rate on some of these hands like meaningful. But that doesn't change the fact that like our win rate in these hands is probably 5%, if not lower.
Yeah, and most of the points you're going to be making are going to be off the good hands you get, not the bad ones, but playing the bad hands. So if you do get very lucky, you're going to get a Mangan instead of Riichi Nomi is equally important.
Yeah, and it's part of like I've said it a lot in my lecture actually on tournament strategies. It's like you have to. I think Pio is just I think Pio is just born with that. The how can one become greedier like Pio instead of playing for efficiency? I think he's just born that way. I think he just sees the world in a different way. But like I said it in my tournament lecture, like you have to be really lucky, even just to do well in a tournament, let alone win it. So it's just like taking as many chances as you have to get lucky is gonna help. We saw, I think someone made the cut in top 6. Someone made the top 16 cut last year, jumping about 30 or 40 places in the last Hanchan because they got a dealer Suanko. Yeah, it's like you're only gonna have like if you're having like an average day, you're gonna have the best hand at the table like a quarter of the time. That's That's like 2 to 3 hands a game that you have like the best hand or like the fastest hand, and that's like if you're lucky. And with sample size variance, like it could very easily be like 0 times through 2 or 3 games. So it's just like, making something happen when your hands just aren't really cooperating is like can go a long way both to like minimizing losses and maximizing point gain.
If you're one of those people that cares about the emotional damage to having a really really nasty looking discard pile and then chasing somebody because you did get to 10 by one of these nice things and seeing the fear in their eyes is an extra bonus.
Yeah, there's also the emotional damage of like, winning your trashy like Riichi Dora 1 that has like that had a bad weight, but it got Tenpai first. And you just have to like feel the despair of that person who had 3 Dora chilling in their hand and was the Shanten for Tanya Dora 3.
And then like the last things to take away is like some of the hypotheticals that we presented, like the kind of what I just talk about the Riichi Simo Chanmyan Peiko, for example, is like it's likely to elicit like a yeah right, yeah I'm not gonna win that response because it's so rare, and that's fair. But remember that these situations we presented, a lot of them are talking about how to play from a desperate situation where your hand is awful or you're in last. So you want to leave the most room for great luck to deliver the good value.
Yeah, and if you don't want to find yourself in these desperate situations, just don't lose. Just don't be in last place. It's easy. Just win your hands. Draw the tiles you want.
I'm gonna stop you right there. And
This is hand shuffle.
then, but lastly, we've kind of tailored what we've talked about so far for Riichi Nomi Open. But remember that the formula is cumulative, and the way the prize structure is set up, that everyone's got something to play for. So if you have 0 points, for example, like I mentioned earlier, if you win a Baimon and you stay in last, that's still 16 more that you would not have had. So if you want to dream big when in a bad situation, take the +8, take the +12, take the +16. That is totally fine under these
Yeah.
these rule set.
Yeah, and Conflict Dog actually brought up something that we didn't really mention, but I think most people are familiar with. The last way to just like, create a mangan out of thin air, just press that con button. Like it'll happen sometimes. Most of the time it won't, but
I always
it's situationally like it can help.
tournaments is more there's more situations for it to roll the dice like that, but I always tell people when they want a con is there's one door indicator and you have everyone has the same amount to get it, but there's 3 more that are not you. So the other people
Yeah.
are more likely to get Dora.
Yeah, there are 39 tiles in people's hands at any given time that aren't yours, as opposed to 13 tiles in your hand to hit that Dora.
Yep.
In terms of Q&A, we have
It's just
Hunger
open
Open
for anybody to ask any extra questions, but that's going to conclude what we have for the presentation content.
Yeah, we have Honver asking like what general call rates to be targeted for the highest value gathering. Honestly, like any given tournament, it's going to be like few enough hands and games where like your call rate's just going to depend on the hands that you get. For me, I do a lot of calling towards the end of hands and in longer games where I'm just trying to like squeeze points out of being Tenpai at the end, or really just like prioritize calling when I have like potential Dora 2 but not great shapes. Like it's like calling is just it's very player specific, and people have made like successful mahjong careers out of call rates between 8 and 60%. It really just kind of depends on what you're getting. If anyone else would like to ask us anything, please feel free. Also, like
At this point, I think we can have people open their mics if they want to ask a question if it's faster
same.
than typing. We don't mind.
Also,
We're at the end of the content.
yeah, my DMs are also always open. I'm terminally online, so I will attempt to reply.
Me too.
Yeah. So like if anyone ever just like feels like asking something about Mahjong, like more than happy to give my opinion. Whether or not you think my opinion is worth anything is up to you. But we hope that you've gotten something out of this lecture. We enjoyed putting it together. This is definitely one of the fun things about Mahjong is making miracles happen out of garbage. I do see Neil typing. Maybe we do have a question, but otherwise,
I like easiest Baimon is Tiny Eldora 7.
that is
Yes.
true. You know, it's much easier than putting
It's
together
just
some
having all
close
3
down.
Akadora and calling a con of the Dora. You don't even need to hit con Dora.
True. But yeah, I believe that is everything we have. Thank you so much to Claire and the rest of the administrative team at Riichi Nomi NYC. We always are super happy to participate and make things, run for you.
Yep. We generally we just love what New York City is doing for the Mahjong community. The club is awesome. I mean, we obviously
It
are
really is.
members ourselves, even not living there. So it's
I'm gonna go shill. Both of us have previously given lectures on Riichi Nomi's YouTube channel. Mine was about tournament strategies. You may find that a little bit relevant.
Mine was on push fold decision making, which is they were both like 2 hours long. So buckle in if you go to watch them.
go do your agility rooftops. I've been playing too much 2007 Scape recently. Queue up a Diablo 4 raid and just put us on as background noise. I believe this is also being recorded and will be uploaded at some point when they get around to that. However, the people behind the scenes and at the forefront of Riichi Nomi work very hard every day to take care of this mess. So it'll get up when it gets up. They have a little bit more important things going on right now.
Yeah, we discussed this, and we were thinking it would be like 45 to 50 minutes, and it looks like we're pushing.
Well, we didn't start until 8:15, so I think we're like
we're pushing like 75, so we should probably wrap it up.
All right, yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you for coming out today and giving an awesome lecture for our members. The chat is filled with thank yous, and all of the mod team is extremely thankful for you putting aside your time for this. With that, I'm going to wrap up this recording.
You are legally obligated to pay us in points at Riichi Nomi.
Yeah, sure. During the free play, I'm a referee, so I can pay you busting sticks. That's about it.
Oh no.
It's negative.
Anyway,
it's not so good. Well, yeah. Thanks everyone for coming out. I'm gonna conclude the recording now. You guys can feel free to hang around or do whatever you want now. Club night should resume.